My boyfriend defended his friend who made disgusting jokes about my body and told me to leave if I didn't like it. So I left, paid only for my meal, and what I did next destroyed their friendship forever. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. When I walked into that restaurant 3 months ago, I thought I was just meeting my boyfriend's best friend for the first time. I had no idea I was walking into a nightmare that would change everything about my relationship, my self-respect, and ultimately lead me to discover something so shocking about both of them that it would destroy their friendship forever. My name is Sarah, and I'd been dating Marcus for 8 months. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, successful, always knew the right thing to say. He worked at some tech startup downtown and was always talking about his business ventures with his best friend Jake. Marcus had been wanting me to meet Jake for months, constantly saying things like, "You two are going to love each other," and "Jake's been dying to meet the girl who finally stole my heart." I should have trusted my instincts when Marcus seemed nervous that evening. He kept checking his phone, adjusting his shirt, and making weird comments like, "Just remember, Jake has a really specific sense of humor, and he's been through a rough divorce, so he might seem a bit intense." The restaurant Marcus chose was upscale. White tablecloths, dim lighting, the kind of place where you whisper instead of talk normally. I wore my favorite black dress, the one that made me feel confident and beautiful. Marcus had specifically requested I dress nice, because apparently Jake was really into fashion and notices these things. Jake arrived 15 minutes late, and the moment he walked up to our table, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, wearing an expensive suit that screamed, "I have money, and I want everyone to know it." But it wasn't his appearance that bothered me. It was the way he looked at me. His eyes traveled slowly from my face down to my chest, then back up, and he smirked like he'd just seen something amusing. "So this is the famous Sarah?" Jake said, not extending his hand for a shake, but instead sliding into the booth across from us. "Marcus has told me so much about you, though he definitely undersold some of your assets." I felt my cheeks burn, but I forced a smile and looked at Marcus, expecting him to say something. Instead, he just laughed nervously and said, "Jake, man, be nice." Be nice? That was his response to his friend objectifying me within the first 30 seconds of meeting me. Jake ordered wine for the table without asking what I preferred, then spent the next 20 minutes talking exclusively to Marcus about work, completely ignoring me except for the occasional glance at my chest. I tried to join the conversation several times, but Jake would either talk over me or give me this condescending look like I was a child interrupting adult conversation. Then, the joke started. "You know, Marcus," Jake said, taking a large gulp of wine, "I was telling my ex-wife before the divorce that all women are basically the same. They pretend to be interested in your personality and your dreams, but really they're just calculating how much money they can squeeze out of you before they get bored and move on to the next guy." I looked at Marcus again, waiting for him to defend me or at least change the subject. Instead, he just chuckled and said, "Come on, Jake. Not all women are like Jennifer." Not all women? So he agreed that some women were like that? I felt something twist in my chest, but I kept quiet, telling myself that maybe Jake was just having a bad day and Marcus was trying to keep the peace. But Jake wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on me with this cruel smile, and said, "Take Sarah here, for example. I bet she's already mentally redecorating Marcus's apartment and planning the wedding. Am I right, sweetheart?" The way he said sweetheart made my skin crawl. It was dripping with sarcasm and disdain, like he was talking to a particularly stupid pet. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I have my own apartment and my own career. I'm not planning anyone's wedding." Jake laughed. Not a genuine laugh, but that harsh, mocking sound that some men make when they think a woman has said something adorably naive. "Oh, honey," he said, "they all say that. But give it a few more months and you'll be dropping hints about engagement rings and talking about how your biological clock is ticking." I felt my face get hot, and I looked at Marcus desperately. This was his chance to stand up for me, to show Jake that he wouldn't tolerate someone disrespecting his girlfriend. Instead, Marcus just shifted uncomfortably in his seat and mumbled, "Jake, maybe we should talk about something else. Maybe we should talk about something else. Not, don't talk to my girlfriend like that, or that's completely inappropriate." Just a weak suggestion to change topics. Jake apparently took this as encouragement because his comments got worse throughout dinner. He made jokes about my intelligence, my appearance, my career, all while Marcus sat there doing nothing more than occasionally saying, "Come on, man," in this half-hearted way that made it clear he wasn't actually bothered by any of it. The breaking point came when our food arrived. I had ordered a salad because honestly, Jake's comments had killed my appetite, and I just wanted this nightmare dinner to end. Jake noticed and immediately pounced on it. "A salad, really?" he said, loud enough that people at nearby tables turned to look. "Let me guess. You're on one of those diets where you eat like a rabbit all day and then go home and cry into a pint of ice cream because you can't figure out why you're not losing weight fast enough to keep Marcus interested." The entire restaurant seemed to go quiet. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not because of what Jake had said, but because I realized that the man I thought I was falling in love with was sitting right there, listening to his friend humiliate me and doing absolutely nothing to stop it. "That's enough," I said quietly, but Jake wasn't finished. "Oh, come on, I'm just having fun." fun," he said, that same cruel smile spreading across his face. "Can't you take a joke? You women are all so sensitive. No wonder Marcus complains about having to walk on eggshells around you." Marcus complains about me to this monster? I turned to Marcus, and for just a moment, I saw something in his face that broke my heart. He looked guilty, like Jake had just revealed something he wasn't supposed to know, which meant that Marcus had been talking about me behind my back, sharing private details about our relationship with someone who clearly had zero respect for women in general, and me in particular. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "say something." He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked around the restaurant like he was worried people were staring. Finally, he leaned forward and said in this urgent whisper, "Sarah, just ignore him. You know how Jake gets when he's been drinking. He doesn't mean anything by it. He doesn't mean anything by it." Those 6 words told me everything I needed to know about Marcus and our relationship. But Jake wasn't done with me yet. He leaned forward, his wine-scented breath making me want to gag, and said in this mock-sympathetic voice, "Look, sweetheart, I know this is probably hard for you to hear, but someone needs to tell you the truth. Marcus is way out of your league. I mean, look at you. You're what, a 6 on a good day? And Marcus could have any woman he wants. You should be grateful he's settling for you instead of acting all offended when someone points out the obvious." The tears I'd been holding back started to fall, and I couldn't stop them. I wasn't crying because of Jake's words. I was crying because the man I thought loved me was sitting right there, watching me get torn apart, and his biggest concern seemed to be that other people in the restaurant might notice. "If you don't like my friend's sense of humor," Marcus said finally, his voice cold and distant like I was some stranger bothering him, "you can just pay for your meal and leave." The world stopped. The sounds of the restaurant faded away, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Marcus had just told me to leave. Not Jake, Marcus. My boyfriend of 8 months had just chosen his toxic friend over me and told me to get out. I stared at him for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few seconds. I was looking for some sign that he didn't mean it, that he was going to suddenly snap out of whatever trance Jake had put him in, and remember that he was supposed to care about me. Instead, he just looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact, like he was already mentally moving on from this conversation. "Thanks for the option," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked to the front of the restaurant. I paid for my salad and my 1 glass of wine, exactly $28, $50, and walked out without looking back. I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot for about 10 minutes, crying and shaking. Not because of Jake's insults. I'd dealt with jerks like him before. I was crying because the man I thought I was falling in love with had just shown me exactly who he really was, and it was devastating. My phone started buzzing with texts from Marcus. The first one came about 5 minutes after I left. "Sarah, come back. Jake's just drunk and being stupid." Then, "You're overreacting. He was just joking around." Then, "Fine, be dramatic. We'll talk tomorrow when you've calmed down." I turned my phone face down and drove home, but I couldn't stop thinking about something Marcus had said earlier. He'd mentioned that Jake was going through a rough divorce, and that he and Jake were working on business ventures together. Marcus was always secretive about his work, always taking calls in the other room and being vague when I asked about his day. I'd never been the type of girlfriend to snoop, but something about that dinner felt wrong beyond just Jake's horrible behavior. The way Marcus had looked guilty when Jake mentioned him complaining about me, the way he'd been so nervous beforehand. It felt like there was more to this story. When I got home, I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and started researching. Marcus worked for a tech startup called Innovate Now Solutions, but when I searched for the company online, I could barely find anything. Their website was basic, with stock photos and generic descriptions of cutting-edge technological solutions. No real client testimonials, no specific information about what they actually did. But then I found something interesting. Jake's LinkedIn profile listed him as co-founder of Innovate Now Solutions. Marcus had never mentioned that Jake was his business partner. In fact, he'd always talked about Jake like he was just a friend who gave him business advice. I spent the next 3 hours going down an internet rabbit hole, and what I found made my blood run cold. Innovate Now Solutions wasn't really a tech company. Based on some business filings I found, they were running something called a consulting firm that seemed to specialize in helping small businesses optimize their tax strategies. But when I dug deeper, I found several complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau from clients who claimed they'd been overcharged for services that were never delivered. One complaint in particular caught my attention. A small restaurant owner named Maria Gonzalez had paid Innovate, now $15 store dollars, for a complete digital transformation package that was supposed to include a new website, social media management, and accounting software integration. According to her complaint, they took her money, gave her a basic website that didn't work properly, and then stopped returning her calls. But here's the really disturbing part. Maria's complaint included copies of her email exchanges with the company, and I recognized the writing style immediately. It was Marcus. He had signed his emails as Mark Stevens, Senior Solutions Consultant, but it was definitely his voice, his way of writing. Marcus had been using a fake name with clients. I kept digging and found more complaints. More clients who'd been burned by Innovate Now Solutions. Small business owners, mostly immigrants or elderly people who weren't tech-savvy, who'd trusted Marcus and Jake with their hard-earned money and gotten nothing in return. My hands were literally shaking as I read through complaint after complaint. The man I'd been dating, the man I'd been considering a future with, was scamming vulnerable people for a living. And Jake wasn't just his obnoxious friend. He was his business partner in crime. Suddenly, Jake's behavior at dinner made more sense. He wasn't just a misogynist with no filter. He was someone who made his living taking advantage of people. So of course he had no respect for anyone he saw as weak or vulnerable. And Marcus wasn't just a coward who wouldn't stand up to his friend. He was an active participant in hurting innocent people. I felt sick to my stomach, but I also felt something else: determination. At 2 a.m., I got a text from Marcus. Jake feels bad about tonight. He wants to apologize. Can we all get coffee tomorrow and talk about this like adults? Jake feels bad. Sure he did. I texted back, I need some time to think. I'll call you in a few days. But I wasn't planning to call him in a few days. I was planning something much more satisfying. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day creating files on my computer. I screenshot every complaint I could find about Innovate Now Solutions, saved copies of all their business filings, and started building a timeline of their scam operation. But I needed more evidence, and I knew exactly how to get it. Marcus had left his laptop at my apartment a few weeks earlier and never picked it up. He'd been using my Wi-Fi and leaving it plugged in on my kitchen counter, saying it was easier than carrying it back and forth. I'd never looked at it because I trusted him. Well, that trust was officially dead. His laptop wasn't password protected. Apparently, Marcus thought his biggest security threat was someone stealing his Netflix password. I felt a little guilty for about 30 seconds, and then I remembered Maria Gonzalez's story about losing $15,000 to these two predators. What I found on Marcus's laptop was worse than I'd imagined. There were spreadsheets with client information, including notes about which clients were easy targets and which ones were likely to cause problems if they complain. There were email templates for different types of scams, including one called the Widow Special, that was specifically designed to target elderly women who had recently lost their husbands. I found contracts that promised services Marcus and Jake had no intention of delivering, and email chains between Marcus and Jake where they laughed about their clients, calling them suckers and walking ATMs. But the most damning evidence was a folder labeled Exit Strategy. Inside were discussions about how to shut down Innovate Now Solutions and disappear if things got too hot, including plans to move the money to offshore accounts and start a new company under different names. They weren't just scamming people. They were planning to take all the money and run, leaving their victims with no way to get justice or recover their losses. I spent 6 hours copying everything onto multiple flash drives. Every email, every document, every spreadsheet. I organized it all into clear chronological folders that would be easy for investigators to understand. Then I started making phone calls. My first call was to Maria Gonzalez. I found her restaurant's phone number through her BBB complaint and called during lunch hour, hoping to catch her when she wasn't too busy. Hi, Mrs. Gonzalez. My name is Sarah, and I'm calling about Innovate Now Solutions. I know this might sound crazy, but I have information that might help you get your money back. There was a long pause, and then she said in accented English, "You know about those thieves? They stole $15,000 from me. $15,000. That was supposed to be for my daughter's college. My heart broke for her, and my resolve hardened. Mrs. Gonzalez, I have evidence that they've been doing this to lots of people. Would you be willing to talk to the police if I gave them your information?" "Police?" she said, and I could hear hope creeping into her voice. "You think the police would listen?" "I think with the right evidence, they'd have to listen." Over the next 2 days, I called 12 different clients who had filed complaints against Innovate Now Solutions. 8 of them were willing to talk to investigators, and together they'd lost over $120,000 to Marcus and Jake's scam operation. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more call to make, and this one was going to be the most satisfying conversation of my life. Marcus answered on the second ring, and his voice was all fake cheerfulness, like nothing had happened at dinner 2 nights before. "Sarah, I was just thinking about you. Listen, I talked to Jake, and he really does feel terrible about the other night. He was going through some stuff with his divorce, and he took it out on you, which wasn't fair. Can we please just move past this?" I let him finish his pathetic little speech before I said anything. When he was done, I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully. I know about Innovate Now Solutions." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear his brain scrambling to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. "I don't know what you think you know," he said finally, but his voice had lost all that fake confidence. "But Sarah, you're obviously still upset about dinner and you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months," I said. "I know about Maria Gonzalez and her $15,000. I know about the fake names you use with clients. I know about the Widow Special email template. Should I keep going?" Another Another long silence, and then Marcus's voice changed completely. Gone was the charming boyfriend persona, and in its place was something cold and calculating that I'd never heard before. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to understand something," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "2 nights ago, you told me I could leave if I didn't like your friend's behavior. Well, I left. But you made one crucial mistake. You assumed that quiet, submissive Sarah would just disappear and never cause any problems for you. Sarah, listen to me very carefully," Marcus said, and now there was a threatening edge to his voice. "Whatever you think you found, you need to forget about it. You don't want to get involved in things you don't understand." Was he actually threatening me? The man I'd cooked dinner for? The man I'd introduced to my friends? The man I'd been falling in love with was threatening me to keep quiet about the fact that he was stealing money from vulnerable people. "Actually, Marcus, I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you and Jake have been running a scam operation that preys on small business owners who trust you with their life savings. I understand that you've stolen over $120,000 from people who couldn't afford to lose it. And I understand that you're about to face the consequences of your choices. You can't prove anything," he said, but I could hear the panic starting to creep in. "Can I?" I asked. "Because I have your laptop, Marcus. Remember? The one you left at my apartment with all your files on it? The one that isn't password protected because you're apparently as bad at security as you are at being a decent human being?" The sound he made was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. "You went through my laptop?" "I went through everything. Every email, every contract, every spreadsheet where you and Jake rate your victims by how easy they are to manipulate. By the way, what does walking ATM mean? Because you use that phrase a lot when you're talking about elderly clients." Marcus was quiet for so long that I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he said, "Sarah, please. You don't understand the whole situation. These people, they would have lost their money anyway to someone else. At least with us, they got something for it." I actually laughed out loud. "Something? Maria Gonzalez got a broken website that doesn't work. Robert Chen paid you $8,000 for accounting software that you never delivered. What exactly did these people get besides robbed?" "Look, I know how this looks," Marcus said, and now he was switching to his manipulation voice, the one he probably used on clients. "But Sarah, you have to understand, this economy is brutal. Jake and I were just trying to survive like everyone else. These big corporations are the real villains." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't you dare try to justify stealing from a woman who is saving money for her daughter's college education. Don't try to make me feel sorry for you when you're living in a luxury apartment, while Maria Gonzalez is working double shifts to try to recover the money you stole from her. What are you going to do?" Marcus asked, and all the manipulation was gone from his voice now. He just sounded scared. "I'm going to give you a choice," I said. "The same choice you gave me at dinner. You can make this right, or you can face the consequences." "What do you mean, make it right?" "I mean, you and Jake are going to return every penny you stole from those people. All $120,000 plus interest. And you're going to shut down your scam operation permanently." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Sarah, we don't have $120,000 just sitting around. That money it's invested in the business. Then you better figure out how to uninvest it," I said. "Because if you don't, I'm going to the FBI with everything I found on your laptop. I've already contacted 8 of your victims, and they're all willing to testify against you. I have copies of all your emails, all your contracts, all your business filings. I have enough evidence to put both of you in federal prison." "You're bluffing," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Try me," I said. "You have 48 hours to contact Maria Gonzalez and arrange to return her money. If she doesn't hear from you by Friday at 5 p.m., I'm making some phone calls to law enforcement agencies." "Sarah, please," Marcus said, and now he was begging. "I love you. We can work through this. Jake was the mastermind behind all of this. I just went along with it because I needed the money. I never wanted to hurt anyone." The fact that he thought I would believe that he thought I was still stupid enough to fall for his lies, made me angrier than anything else that had happened. "You know what, Marcus?" I said. "You're right about one thing. You never wanted to hurt anyone. You just didn't care if you did, which is somehow even worse." I was about to hang up when he said something that made my blood freeze. "Sarah, you need to be very careful about what you do next. Jake has friends who don't like people causing problems for business. If you go to the police, there could be consequences that go way beyond what you're prepared for." Was he threatening me again? Or was he warning me that Jake was connected to people who were even more dangerous than I'd realized? "Are you threatening me, Marcus?" "I'm trying to protect you," as he said, but something in his tone made me think he was telling the truth about this, at least. Jake isn't just a con artist. He has connections to people who handle problems in ways that don't involve lawyers or courts. If you expose this operation, you could be putting yourself in real danger. For the first time since this all started, I felt a flicker of real fear. But then I thought about Maria Gonzalez working double shifts to try to recover the money they'd stolen from her, and Robert Chen, who'd had to delay his retirement because because of what they'd done to him and all the other victims who were suffering while Marcus and Jake lived comfortable lives off their stolen money. Then I guess you better convince Jake to pay back his victims, I said, because I'm not backing down. You have 48 hours. I hung up before he could respond and immediately called the one person I knew would help me figure out what to do next. My sister Lisa was a criminal defense attorney, and while she usually defended people instead of prosecuting them, she knew more about how these cases worked than anyone else I could think of. I drove to her office and laid out everything I'd discovered. Lisa listened to the whole story without interrupting, occasionally making notes or asking for clarification. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Sarah, you've just handed law enforcement a federal wire fraud case on a silver platter. This is big." "How big?" I asked. "Big enough that the FBI is definitely going to be interested. Wire fraud across state lines, targeting vulnerable populations, systematic operation over multiple years. We're talking about federal charges that could put them away for a long time." "But Marcus said Jake has dangerous connections. What if they try to hurt me for going to the police?" Lisa's expression got serious. "That changes things. If Jake really is connected to organized crime, we need to be smart about how we handle this. But Sarah, you can't let them intimidate you into letting this slide. These people have hurt too many innocent victims." She picked up her phone and started dialing. "I'm calling a friend of mine at the FBI. Agent Rodriguez specializes in financial crimes, and she's going to want to meet with you as soon as possible." As I listened to Lisa explain the situation to Agent Rodriguez, I realized there was no going back now. In 48 hours, either Marcus and Jake would start returning the money they'd stolen, or I was going to destroy both of their lives. But I had a feeling that even if they did pay back their victims, I wasn't done with them yet, because someone needed to make sure they understood that actions have consequences, and that they couldn't just charm their way out of every problem they created. The 48 hours I gave Marcus felt like the longest 2 days of my life. I barely slept, jumping at every sound, wondering if Jake's dangerous connections were real, or if Marcus was just trying to scare me into backing down. On Thursday morning, I got a call from Maria Gonzalez. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was shaking with excitement. "That man Marcus, he called me yesterday. He said he wants to return my money. All of it, plus extra for the trouble he caused." My heart started racing. "He did? What exactly did he say?" "He said there had been a mistake, that his company had failed to deliver the services I paid for, and that he wanted to make it right. He's supposed to bring me a cashier's check for $18,000 tomorrow afternoon. $18,000. That was $3,000 more than Maria had originally paid." Marcus was clearly hoping that a little extra money would keep her from asking questions or pursuing legal action. "Maria, that's wonderful," I said, "but I want you to do me a favor. When Marcus brings you that check, I want you to record the conversation on your phone. Can you do that?" "Yes, of course, but why?" "Because I want to make sure he doesn't try to make you sign anything that would prevent you from talking about what happened. And I want evidence that he admitted the company failed to deliver what they promised." Over the next few hours, I got similar calls from 3 other victims. Marcus and Jake were apparently working frantically to contact everyone who had filed complaints against their company, offering full refunds plus extra money. But something felt wrong about it. If they were really trying to make things right, why were they only contacting the people who had already filed official complaints? What about all the other victims who had just quietly accepted their losses and moved on? I called Lisa and shared my suspicions. "I think they're only paying back the people who could cause them legal problems," I said. "They're not actually trying to make amends. They're just trying to eliminate witnesses." "That's probably exactly what they're doing," Lisa agreed. "But Sarah, even if their motives are selfish, those people are getting their money back. That's a good thing." "But what about all the other victims? The ones who haven't filed complaints?" Lisa was quiet for a moment. "That's why we need to move forward with the FBI investigation. Even if Marcus and Jake refund everyone who has already complained, they need to face consequences for what they've done, and they need to be stopped from doing it to other people in the future." Friday afternoon, I was sitting in Agent Rodriguez's office, going through all the evidence I'd collected. She was a small, intense woman with sharp eyes who took detailed notes as I explained everything I'd discovered. "Ms. Johnson," she said when I finished, "this is one of the most comprehensive cases of evidence collection I've seen from a civilian. You've essentially done half our job for us. So you're going to investigate them. We're going to do more than investigate them," she said. "Based on what you've shown me, we're going to arrest them. The question is when and how." Agent Rodriguez explained that they wanted to wait until Marcus and Jake had finished paying back the victims who had complained, because it would give them additional evidence of consciousness of guilt. When someone suddenly starts returning money after running a scam for years, It's usually because they know they've been caught, she said. But what if they disappear once they've paid everyone back? I asked. Marcus mentioned something about an exit strategy. We'll be watching them, Agent Rodriguez assured me. They won't be going anywhere without us knowing about it. That evening, I got a text from Marcus. I hope you're happy. Jake and I are making things right with everyone who had complaints. We're shutting down the business and going our separate ways. Can we please just call this even and move on with our lives? I stared at that text for a long time. Part of me was tempted to just let it go. They were returning the money, shutting down the scam operation operation, and Marcus was clearly miserable. Maybe that was enough justice. But then I remembered the way Jake had looked at me across that restaurant table, the way he deliberately tried to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers. I remembered the way Marcus had sat there and let it happen, then told me to leave when I didn't appreciate being treated like garbage. And I remembered all the victims I hadn't been able to find, the people who had been scammed by these two predators and had just quietly accepted their losses because they didn't know how to fight back. I texted Marcus back, "I'm glad you're returning the money to people. That was the right thing to do. But no, we're not even. Not by a long shot." Saturday morning, I got a call that changed everything. "Is this Sarah Johnson?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Detective Williams with the Portland Police Department. Agent Rodriguez from the FBI gave me your number." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" "Ms. Johnson, we arrested Jake Morrison last night on federal wire fraud charges. When we searched his apartment, we found some things that I think you need to know about." "What kind of things?" "Photos of you. A lot of them. Photos of your apartment building, your car, your workplace. It looks like he's been following you for several days." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Following me?" "There's more. We found text messages between Morrison and Marcus Hoffman where they discussed taking care of the Sarah problem permanently. Ms. Johnson, I need you to take this very seriously. These men may have been planning to hurt you." I sank into a chair, my hands shaking. "Where's Marcus now?" "We're looking for him. He wasn't at his apartment when we went to arrest him this morning. His neighbors said he left with several suitcases around 5 a.m. Marcus had run. The man who had claimed to love me, who had begged me to work things out with him, had been planning to hurt me and then disappeared when his partner got arrested. Ms. Johnson, I need you to stay somewhere safe until we find Marcus. Do you have family or friends you can stay with?" I called Lisa, and within an hour, I was at her house with a bag of clothes and my laptop. We spent the day going through everything again, trying to figure out if there were any clues about where Marcus might have gone. That evening, Agent Rodriguez called with an update. "We found Marcus Hoffman," she said. "He was at the airport trying to board a flight to Mexico under a fake name. He's in custody now." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "So it's over?" "The immediate danger is over," Agent Rodriguez said. "But Ms. Johnson, there's something else you need to know. When we arrested Marcus, he had $340 in cash with him. $340 but they told me they didn't have the money to pay everyone back. They lied. It looks like they only paid back the victims who had filed complaints. Maybe $50,000 total, and then tried to disappear with the rest of the money. So even when they were pretending to make amends, even when Marcus was begging me to forgive him and move on, they were still planning to steal from their victims and run away. They had returned just enough money to cover their tracks, then tried to disappear with the rest." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now they face the consequences of their choices," Agent Rodriguez said. "Federal wire fraud charges carry sentences of up to 20 years in prison. With the amount of money involved and the number of victims, they're looking at serious time." After I hung up, I sat in Lisa's kitchen, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was in love with Marcus. I thought Jake was just an obnoxious friend who had drunk too much and said some inappropriate things. Now I knew that Marcus was a criminal who had been planning to hurt me, and Jake was his partner in a systematic operation that had destroyed the lives of dozens of innocent people. But there was something else I was thinking about, something that was going to make the next phase of my plan even more satisfying than I had originally imagined. Because while Marcus and Jake had been busy running their scam operation and planning to hurt me, I had been busy too. And what I had discovered about their other activities was going to ensure that their time in prison was just the beginning of their punishment. The friendship they valued so much, the partnership that had made them feel so smart and powerful, was about to be completely and permanently destroyed. And this time, it wouldn't be some quiet, submissive girlfriend doing the destroying. The trial started 6 months later, and I was there for every single day. Marcus and Jake had been held without bail after the FBI discovered they had fake passports and offshore bank accounts in 3 different countries. Their elaborate exit strategy turned out to be even more sophisticated than I'd originally thought. But here's what I learned during those court proceedings. When criminals get caught, they don't stay loyal to each other. They turn on each other faster than you could imagine. Jake's lawyer argued that he was the victim of Marcus's manipulation, that Marcus had been the mastermind who convinced an innocent, heartbroken divorcee to participate in criminal activities. According to Jake's testimony, Marcus had approached him with the scam idea and threatened to ruin his life if he didn't go along with it. Marcus's lawyer told a completely different story. In his version, Jake was a dangerous sociopath who had blackmailed Marcus into helping with the scam by threatening to hurt me and other people Marcus cared about. Marcus claimed he had tried to get out of the operation multiple times, but Jake had forced him to continue. Watching them testify against each other was better than any revenge I could have planned myself. These 2 men who had been best friends, who had shared their criminal profits and their contempt for their victims, were now desperately trying to destroy each other to save themselves. The most damaging testimony came when the prosecutor played recorded phone calls between Marcus and Jake that had been made after their arrests. They didn't know the jail phones were monitored, and what they said to each other revealed the true depth of their selfishness and cruelty. "This is all your fault," Marcus had said during one call. "If you hadn't been so obvious about following Sarah, we never would have gotten caught." "My fault?" Jake had responded. "You're the one who was stupid enough to leave your laptop at her apartment, and you're the one who couldn't control your girlfriend well enough to keep her from snooping." "She wasn't my girlfriend," Marcus had said, and hearing that was like a knife to the chest. "She was a mark, just like all the others. I was working on a long-term con to get access to her family's money. Her father owns 3 restaurants, and I thought we could set up a fake consulting deal with him for at least $200. I had been a mark. Our entire relationship had been a lie from the beginning. Marcus had researched my family, discovered that my father was successful, and targeted me specifically to gain access to more victims." But Jake's response was even worse. "Well, your fake girlfriend is the reason we're both going to prison. When I get out, I'm going to make sure she pays for what she did to us." The prosecutor used that recorded threat to argue for enhanced sentences for both of them. Making threats against a witness, even from prison, was a federal crime in itself. During the victim impact statements, I watched Marcus and Jake as 12 different people stood up to describe how the scam had affected their lives. Maria Gonzalez talked about having to get a second job and delay her daughter's college education. Robert Chen described how losing his retirement savings had forced him to keep working into his 70s. But the statement that broke my heart came from an elderly woman named Dorothy Miller, who had paid Innovate Now Solutions $12,000 to help her late husband's antique business transition to online sales after he died. "I trusted them because they seemed so nice and professional," Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "They promised me that my husband's legacy would live on through the internet, that customers all over the world would be able to appreciate the beautiful things he collected over 40 years of marriage. Instead, they took my money and gave me nothing. The business died with my husband, and now I'm living on Social Security because I was foolish enough to believe in people who saw my grief as an opportunity." I looked at Marcus during Dorothy's statement, hoping to see some sign of remorse or shame. Instead, he was staring at the table in front of him with an expression of bored irritation, like he was waiting for an annoying meeting to end. Jake was worse. He was actually smirking slightly, like he found Dorothy's pain amusing. These weren't people who had made mistakes or gotten in over their heads. These were predators who genuinely enjoyed hurting vulnerable people, and they felt no guilt about what they had done. The sentences were everything I had hoped for and more. Jake got 18 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. Marcus got 16 years for the same charges, with the judge noting that while he had been equally responsible for the scam operation, he had shown slightly more cooperation with investigators. But the real justice came from what happened to them personally. During the trial, it came out that Jake had been stealing money from Marcus throughout their partnership. While Marcus thought they were splitting profits 50-50, Jake had been skimming an extra 30% off the top and hiding it in accounts Marcus didn't know about. The $300 to $40,000 Marcus had tried to flee with, Jake had told him it was their entire remaining balance, when actually there was another $200,000 that Jake had hidden. Marcus was furious when he learned about this betrayal, and his anger led him to reveal information that made Jake's situation much worse. He told investigators about Jake's connections to other criminal operations, including a money laundering scheme that helped drug dealers hide their profits. That information led to additional charges against Jake, and also made him a target for retaliation from the people he had betrayed by cooperating with law enforcement. Jake, in turn, provided information about Marcus's personal life that destroyed what remained of his reputation. He revealed that Marcus had been running similar scams in 2 other states under different names, and that he had specifically targeted women in serious relationships because he found it easier to manipulate their emotions. By the time both trials were over, they had revealed so many secrets about each other that their friendship wasn't just destroyed. It had become a mutual hatred that was going to follow them both into prison. But the final nail in the coffin of their relationship came from something I discovered during my own research. Remember how Marcus had claimed that Jake was the mastermind and he was just a reluctant participant? Well, I found evidence that proved Marcus had actually been running scam operations for years before he ever met Jake. Court records from Florida showed that he had been convicted of credit card fraud when he was 23, and there were civil judgments against him in 3 different states for various con games he had run throughout his 20s. When I provided this information to the prosecutor, it not only increased Marcus's sentence, but also completely destroyed his credibility with Jake. Jake realized that Marcus had been lying to him about being a first-time criminal, and that Marcus had probably been planning to eventually scam him too. Their friendship, which had been built on mutual greed and contempt for other people, crumbled completely when they realized they couldn't trust each other either. The last time I saw them together was during the sentencing hearing. Marcus was on one side of the courtroom with his lawyer. Jake was on the other side with his lawyer, and they wouldn't even look at each other. When Jake's sentence was announced, Marcus actually smiled slightly. When Marcus's sentence was announced, Jake nodded with satisfaction. These two men who had terrorized innocent people together, who had laughed about their victims together, who had planned to hurt me together, now hated each other more than they had ever hated their victims. 2 years have passed since that night at the restaurant when Marcus told me I could leave if I didn't like Jake's behavior. Sometimes I think about how different my life would be if I had just stayed quiet. If I had accepted Jake's abuse and Marcus's cowardice like a good girlfriend should, I would probably still be dating Marcus, still believing he was a successful entrepreneur, still thinking that his secrecy about work was just professional discretion. I might have even married him, become Mrs. Marcus Hoffman, and spent years unknowingly living off money stolen from people like Maria Gonzalez and Dorothy Miller. Instead, I'm sitting in my new apartment, which I was able to afford because the FBI gave me a reward for providing evidence that led to the recovery of over $500 Euro in stolen funds. Writing this story and thinking about how sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things that could have happened. The victims of Marcus and Jake's scam operation all received full restitution, plus interest, from the money that was recovered during the investigation. Maria Gonzalez's daughter started college last fall. Robert Chen was able to retire with dignity. Dorothy Miller reopened her late husband's antique business online, with help from a legitimate web design company that donated their services after hearing her story. But the real justice came from watching Marcus and Jake destroy each other so completely that their friendship became a cautionary tale about what happens when selfish people run out of other people to exploit. Marcus is currently serving his sentence at a federal prison in Ohio. According to public records, he's been moved 3 times due to conflicts with other inmates. Apparently, when word got out that he had specifically targeted elderly widows and immigrant families, even the other criminals decided he was beneath contempt. Jake is in a maximum security facility in Texas, serving his 18-year sentence in protective custody because the information he provided about drug dealers made him too dangerous to house in general population. He spends 23 hours a day in a cell by himself, with nothing to do but think about the choices that led him there. They will both be eligible for parole in about 10 years, assuming they demonstrate genuine remorse and rehabilitation. Based on the letters they've written to the parole board, which are public record, neither of them has learned anything from this experience. Marcus still blames me for overreacting to what he calls a simple business dispute. Jake still insists that he was the victim of Marcus's manipulation, and that his only crime was trusting the wrong person. Neither of them has ever apologized to their victims or acknowledged the real harm they caused. But here's what I learned from this experience. Sometimes the people who hurt us do us a favor by showing us who they really are. If Jake hadn't been so openly cruel at that dinner, if Marcus hadn't been so obviously weak and selfish in his response, I might never have seen past their masks. I might have wasted years of my life with Marcus, maybe even had children with him, before eventually discovering that the man I thought I loved was actually a predator who saw me as nothing more than a source of money and access to more victims. Instead, one awful dinner led me to discover not just the truth about Marcus and Jake, but the truth about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, braver than I believed I could be, and more determined than I ever imagined when it comes to protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. I also learned something about friendship and loyalty. Real friendship isn't about enabling each other's worst impulses or staying silent when someone you care about is doing wrong. Real friendship is about holding each other accountable and supporting each other in becoming better people. Marcus and Jake thought their friendship was strong because they shared secrets and covered for each other's crimes. But when they were tested, when they had to choose between protecting each other and protecting themselves, their friendship crumbled instantly because it was built on nothing but mutual self-interest. Meanwhile, my sister Lisa, who helped me navigate the legal system and kept me safe during the most dangerous parts of this ordeal, proved what real loyalty looks like. She supported me even when it put her at risk, even when it would have been easier to tell me to just let it go. 6 months ago, I started dating someone new. His name is David, and he's a high school teacher who spends his weekends volunteering at a literacy program for elderly immigrants. When I told him the whole story about Marcus and Jake, his first question was whether I felt safe, and his second question was whether there was anything he could do to help the victims who were still struggling with the aftermath of being scammed. That's what a real man sounds like. That's what someone who actually cares about you sounds like. David has never made a joke at my expense. He's never told me I'm overreacting when something upsets me. He's never defended someone who is disrespecting me by calling it just their sense of humor or suggesting that I should just ignore it. And when I told him about that night at the restaurant, about how Marcus had given me the choice to leave if I didn't like Jake's behavior, David said something that perfectly captured why that moment had been so important. He gave you a choice, and you made the right one. But the fact that he thought giving you that choice was acceptable tells you everything you need to know about who he really was. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently that night. If I had stayed at the table, laughed along with Jake's cruel jokes, and pretended that Marcus's cowardice was acceptable because keeping the peace was more important than keeping my dignity. I would have lost myself. I would have become the kind of person who enables abuse because it's easier than standing up to it. I would have become complicit in Marcus's crimes, maybe even an active participant if he had eventually brought me into his business operations like he planned. Instead, I chose to leave. I chose my self-respect over a relationship with someone who didn't deserve it, and that choice led to justice for dozens of victims, prison sentences for 2 predators, and a new life for me that's built on honesty, integrity, and genuine connection with people who share my values. Looking back, I'm grateful for that terrible dinner. I'm grateful that Jake showed me exactly who he was, and I'm grateful that Marcus showed me exactly who he wasn't. Because if they hadn't been so obviously awful, I might have wasted years trying to fix a relationship that was rotten from the beginning. Today, I look back without any regrets. That night when I was humiliated and told to leave became the moment I finally found my strength. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually deserve. What do you think? Have you ever had a moment where standing up for yourself changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. If you made it this far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for listening to mine.